Okay, this is the second terrain tutorial. Um, the first tutorial I went over how to create height maps in the classic TerraGen program and how to export them. I also went over splitting them up into Photoshop so that you can make larger, more detailed terrain using multiple terrains versus just using one. And then I went over how to assemble it in Unity so that they seem seamless. In fact, I redid the terrain, and because I screwed it up, I redid the terrain, and now you can't really tell where the seam is. If you look really... there you go. You can kind of see it right there. I will be putting in a function, a temporary function, that should seam these up even better. But for now, it is okay. We are building a game called Fight or Flight. It will be on early access, so we're not too concerned with building things out in their fullest and getting more of the main mechanics in the game. So in this tutorial, what am I going to go over? I don't know. I'm going to go over, let's go over terrain and some of these other functions of terrain. Again, I will be making a terrain generator in Unity that will take care of almost all of this for you using alpha maps and Perlin noise algorithms. And you won't have to do really any of it except for what you want to change about it. So, for now, this is how you do everything manually. Now, you can build terrain manually, but I guarantee you it will not look as good as this. Even this doesn't look that great. You can change that in here, use different algorithms. I've used some that are freaking fantastic. But, for now, this is 100 times better than anything that you can make manually. But if you want to change things manually, I'm going to zoom in on the first terrain. So this one's the first terrain. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and put GUI marks on this so you can tell which ones are which as I am playing around with them. The tags that you are seeing pop up are on the bottom left of its corresponding terrain. There you go. So we're going to do terrain 0, 0 right here, bottom left. So if you wanted to edit terrain, this builds up terrain, this levels terrain out to a very specific height that you set, this smooths out terrain, the one that looks like a raindrop over the terrain, this paints textures onto the terrain, this places trees for you. You can draw the trees on, remove trees, etc. This one is for detail maps, which is basically like grass, rocks, stuff like that. The grass will actually blow around and stuff. Very basic. I can build things 100 times better, but for now it's great. And the gearbox is very literal terrain. Terrain settings for like smooth, like you'll see. So we have pixel error, which should have a tooltip. If you hover over it, it does not. How much error is allowed for pixels? As you can see, you're allowed a lot of error, and it becomes like this weird, not so great terrain. The lower it is, I believe, the more detailed it is, but that in itself isn't necessarily the greatest either. So I think 16 was pretty good. It gives you a little bit of error room, but let's just keep it. Let's just do one. You can only have one pixel of error. That'll work just fine. Base map distance is, again, no tooltip. Thanks a lot. You can play around with it, slide it around. I can't remember what it is. I think it has to do with like how far away you are from it for like its tessellation, but I could be wrong. You can play around with it. It doesn't really matter. 1,000's probably fine. I think when we apply a material to it, that will change. I believe I've had it to where I've gotten like really weird texture errors unless the base map distance is really high. Casting shadows. Alright, we have a directional light in here. Let's go find it. Let's move it up somewhere where we can actually see it. Casting shadows basically means that the terrain object can cast shadows onto itself, etc. Pretty basic. As you can see, it's casting shadows. It does require a lot more CPU and GPU, but it's fine. It's really not that big of a deal. We can do hard shadows, ramp up the intensity. Hey! Shut up! Sorry about that, my dog. Anyways, I don't know why this is being all... It's not really changing anything too terribly much. Real-time, directional, yippee-yi-yo-ki-yay. Bias, strength. I mean, it should be bounce intensity. It's not really working all that fantastic, is it? We'll play around with lights later. We're just trying to get like a good shadow in here. Doesn't really like me very much. I might just need to get rid of the directional lights. Directional light. That's fine, I guess. We'll just deal with what it is now. For now. We can make it look 100 times better. But for now, that'll be fine. I don't know if it's gonna... Maybe in-game. Okay, so in-game you can see like the shadows there. I'm gonna go ahead and move the camera to the terrain we're dealing with so you can kind of see it better. To do that, you click on main camera, go to game object, and you can say align with view. So it's gonna align it with the scene view that you're in. So sometimes in the scene view it doesn't show you what's actually in the game. If you go to the game view here, it's actually gonna show you. And if I were to go to the terrain and I were to turn off cast shadows, wow, it's really not making a difference, is it? You know what? Maybe it just doesn't matter for itself. Maybe that only matters for other objects. If I were to turn off the directional light, though, it does make a difference. That's fine for now. We'll just leave it as it is. Okay. Back to actually doing stuff. So that was cast shadows. I believe it just casts shadows on like other objects. I don't think it really matters for casting shadows on itself, but built-in standard is fine for materials. Reflection probes, let's just turn those off. We don't really need terrain reflecting. Thickness, I really wish I had tooltips because some of these I've like never touched, and for the most part you don't really need to. Thickness might be like... Did something actually change there? Ugh. Nah, we'll just keep it at 1. I don't think it makes a difference. It really doesn't. Okay, tree and detail objects we will go over in just a minute. Terrain height, we've gone over that. Height map resolution, you should keep that at 513. It's based off of the height map. Base texture resolutions, detail resolution per patch, you can turn this up, and I believe it gives you more fidelity in the detail of the terrain. I would keep it to powers of 2. You know, you can go like 128. This is per patch, so it's super high detail, I guess. See if that makes a difference. You can go back to like 4. 8 is the lowest you can go. We'll keep it at 32. Okay. So here's the first terrain. Now we want to smooth it because we got like these weird like divots and bubbles we don't really need in our game. So you're going to go to this little teardrop here. Go ahead and click the really big one because we're just going to go ahead and just do the whole thing. Increase the brush size all the way up. Opacity 50 is fine. And then you can just go ahead and run it over the entire terrain square. Just like this. Over everything at least once. And it should smooth it out. So when you go back in, you get less of those like weird, like high detail ridges. See how I smooth that out? Sometimes it would be a good idea to use the feathered brush just so that you don't get like hard edges. So I'm just smoothing it out. You don't want to smooth it out too much. You don't want it to look like wow mountains, but you do want to smooth it out a little bit. Especially like in here, like when players are like traveling through like canyon ravines. You want them to be like smoother canyon ravines. Honestly, I would prefer that. Especially when you place trees and stuff, you don't want them to get like stuck on random crap that's just there because we didn't smooth it out. I mean, you can spend as much time as you want doing this. Obviously, it's not doing it over there because that's a different terrain object. So you have to do this for each terrain square. That one doesn't take too long. If you want to edit the terrain, same thing. Just click on this up button. You have opacity is basically like the strength of it. See how I'm like lifting up the terrain there? So like if you wanted to make a mountain right there, it's obviously not going to look as good as just making stuff in Terragen. It's even better if you make stuff in Terragen and then manipulate it because at least you get like these ridges and stuff. The detail. You can even save out this height map, but for me, I just don't even bother with that, really. You want to just keep it as it was in the height map as much as possible. Unless you want to make like a river. If you want to make a river, go ahead. And then when you're done with it, go out to here and export that height map. So that if anything happens in the future, you still have that divot you made for the river. And that is how you edit terrain. If you want to like level it out like a plateau, you can go up to over here. Now, remember the maximum height is 100. So if I make the height, let's say 50, right? Actually, no, let's make it 80. Use this flat brush. Whatever I go over, it's going to flatten it out to 80. No less, no more. So now I have a cliff. Look at that. Plateau. Pretty sweet, huh? That's how you level it out. That's like why it's got like the pinching arrows. Again, I'm not gonna keep that change, just showing you. So one of the most important parts is you don't want your terrain to look like stupid crap all the time. I'm gonna go ahead and I'm just gonna go to Assets, Import Package. I believe it's Environment. If you're not sure if it's like the right package, go ahead and just hit the import button, and then you can review. These are all the files that it pulls in. So I'm just reviewing this, and I believe this should be the right one. Palm fronds, water. Water's great. We need water. We always need water. Water makes games look awesome. I'm going to go ahead and just import this. I think it's the correct one. It's going to go ahead and import it. It's going to put it in the standard assets. You actually won't need to do this. Once I get you set up on SourceTree, you can just go ahead and pull this entire project onto your computer, and it will have everything I'm showing you right now. Everything. So if you want to make your own terrain, just make a new scene, because I'm going to use this test world to start building the game. But create a new scene, which is File, up here, File, New Scene, and then just do exactly what I showed you in the tutorial. And, you know, I don't blame you. It's a lot of information I'm throwing at you at once. Like, I don't expect anybody to be a pro at this, like, right after my tutorials or anything. So if you have questions, please ask. I am more than willing to answer them. It's not a problem. Anyways, let's go ahead and paint this. Hopefully those textures came in. So to add a texture to, like, let's just call this, like, your painter's palette, you know. You hit Edit Texture, hit Add Texture. And it's going to pop up this box. You have two options. You can put in the actual texture, the RGB value, and then you can put in a normal for that texture. So yes, you can have a normals on your texture, like if you have normals for dirt or whatever, it will apply it. And then this is the size of the texture, which is basically like the tiling size. So I'm going to go ahead and hit select, and yes, it did import some. I'm going to go ahead and use this grass one, and no normal, that's fine. I'm going to hit add. So by default, it's going to add it to the entire object. It's your first texture that you applied here, so you really do not have an option. If you want to do another texture, go ahead and hit Add Texture and select another texture. This time I'm going to do actual grass. I'm going to hit Add. Now notice no changes happen. This is what you want to do. Select that texture in your palette, brush size, target strength, opacity, and everything, and then you just start painting it onto the terrain. Just like so. How this is actually working is there's an alpha map that you cannot see that is on this terrain object. It's what I use in my terrain generator, and right now what you are basically doing when you paint this is you are changing the black and white values and gray values to show which texture you want to show. In mine, I apply it via the steepness of the terrain and its height. So like if it's really high up, you're going to get like gray rocks and stuff. If it's really steep, you're also going to have gray rocks, even if it's like really low to the ground. Now we can go ahead and we can add another texture in here. Let's go ahead and add in sand, maybe. And we can go ahead and put sand, like, we select it first. That's too big of a brush size. So you go ahead and like edit the brush size here. You just paste in some sand on the sides of these mountains, maybe. That actually kind of looks stupid, doesn't it? Let's put sand in like some of these valleys. No. Well, you can also change the opacity so that it doesn't quite. So now I'm making like kind of patchy grass here. So it's not like straight up painting it. It's actually it's combining the two textures. So now I'm getting like a grassy sand. And the more like you do this with textures and stuff, like your stuff is going to start looking like really freaking fantastic. I mean, Unity's always been known as that engine that's really easy to use, but it's not necessarily great looking, but I beg to differ. You can really make stuff look really epic in Unity. In fact, the entire game, The Forest, is made in Unity, and that's pretty impressive. So as you can see when I zoom in here, you can kind of see just me drawing all this on here. So now I'm starting to build it out. Kind of looks like arc textures. You can add in another texture. I've added snow textures, so like you have like the peaks of the mountains have snow. I've added in snow particles to the terrain. Here we can do mud. I'll go ahead and add mud in, and turn up the opacity. Put mud up on the tops here of the mountains. And if you didn't know, the controls for all of this is the same as Maya for Unity. I'm pretty sure you knew this already, but in case you didn't, put mud up on the top here of the mountains. Like that. Of course, these are tile textures. They're not very good tile textures, but you know, it's quick and dirty. Another thing you can do is you can edit this texture, and I can go ahead and like ramp down the size, I believe, to make the tiles bigger. Did that make the tiles bigger? Maybe it was, let's go like 50. Yeah, there we go. And hit apply. So you can have like the larger texture looking if you want. You could just you could just edit it. Like you don't have to do anything. Let's go 32 by 32. And then to make the edges softer with the sand here, I'm going to go ahead and go down to the opacity. I'm just going to kind of, no, not that one, this one. Kind of brush it up against the edges, those hard edges, so that it has a better transition between the two of the textures. So you're basically just painting all this on. Anyways, I'm not going to go too far more with this, because it's just the same thing. Just keep going. Actually kind of looks cool if you brush it over the whole thing, so you kind of get a combination of the two. Do like that. And obviously you can spend as much time as you want on this. Go ahead, save your scene every once in a while. Do not delete these terrain objects. These are actually this is like the terrain data. Right here is the splat map. This is the texture that it created. If you see it down here, this right here, that is the texture that was created. Or it's a data texture, so it's just a texture that's used to understand which texture to draw where. But that right there is what drew all of this. Is how it knows to combine and everything. It uses RGBA values, and it uses RGBA as for different textures. So like it'll combine R and B together to give you an RB value, and then, anyways. I'm not going to go too much into the whole programming aspect of it, but that is what it creates. That's why these other ones don't have one yet, because you haven't drawn any textures on it. So let's do some trees now. I need some trees in here. So there's obviously same thing as the textures. There's no trees in here. So you go to Edit Trees, Add Tree. You can go to Game Object, and that package I imported gives you some trees. I don't know if it gives you pine tree. We'll go for conifers. We'll add conifers, and we will add this broadleaf, whatever that's called. We'll add that in too. Now the cool thing is you can mass place trees. Just set up your settings and hit mass place. So you can go tree density. Let's go like 50% of the place. Tree height will be random. Random tree rotation is on, and we will hit mass place trees. I want 10,000 trees, and we hit place. That is a lot of trees. It's like almost too many trees. So there's some more terrain settings in here, and some of these might be some changes that the player can make. Like, this is ridiculous. Like, I'm going to hit mass place trees again, not keep the existing ones, and let's make it 4,000 trees, and hit place. Now they're a little bit more spread out. That's not too bad. This places trees by steepness, not by like height. I think there might be a height setting, but I do not remember. My terrain generator does. So it won't draw trees like up in the mountains like that. But like, as you can see here, it's not it's not placing trees based off of the steepness. Like, it's really steep right here, so there's no trees, which is realistic. And then these trees are drawn three-dimensionally. Actually, I think these might be, yeah, they're drawn three-dimensionally until you get further out. They turn into sprites, and you can change at what distance that happens in the settings. So after you've placed your trees, you go down to the tree and detail objects here. Like, I think if I hit that, it doesn't draw trees at all. So you have detailed distance. We haven't done that yet. Tree distance is it's gonna draw trees based off of the distance from the camera, I believe. Let me look into this. Tree distance. That's what I thought it did. Billboarding. I guess these trees aren't billboarding. Fading length, max mesh trees. You could just ramp that up. That mesh trees basically means like how many of them are 3D objects before they get turned into sprites. Because they become sprites when they're really far away. Because you don't need that high level of detail when it's like so far away. We put 5,000 trees in there in this particular tile. So let's just say 1,000 of them could be 3D meshes. I have a tree pack that I'll go ahead and import. Actually, I might not. I need to fix it first. Wind should be applied to these as well. You have wind settings for grass, and I believe it affects the trees too with bend factor. But in any case, this is just a really simple way to build your terrain out. Nothing too complex or complicated. I'm going to go ahead and we're going to put a detail map too. It's the same thing. You add in what you want. So you have an add grass texture, detail texture, like literal texture, like you want the grass blades, not that, was too grass fonts. Yeah, see the grass frond 01 albedo alpha, and hit add, and let's see if I can get this to work properly. Yeah, holy crap, that was a lot of grass. Let's ramp down that opacity a bit. This also has a draw distance, so you can't really see it unless you come up on it, but I'm drawing grass right there, see? More grass. So if I go back to here to the detail distance and I ramp it up, and then I go back to this and I draw it, you can see more of it as you draw it. Way too much grass. There's a grass density in here. Target strength probably. Yeah, there we go. So the grass is a little bit more spread out. And it doesn't look all that great in the scene view, but if I go over here like this and I move the camera and I look at the game, that's what the game looks like so far. Turn off gizmos. Not too great. I know how to make all of this look fantastic. It just takes time and a lot of editing. So that's like at a distance. So if I go to my terrain object here, and if you keep the game view open here, and you mess with the settings, you're gonna actually see like what's going on here. So like the detail distance, you can see it changing there. The tree stuff that I was having problems with before. Let's not bake light probes for trees. Actually, yeah, let's do that. Detailed tree distance. Seems to just pop up, which is ridiculous. Anyways, billboard starting. Still surprised that it's not really changing anything. It might be the trees that I placed in here, possibly. We're gonna do 1500 actually. Wind settings. If I hit play, you could see the grass moving right now through the wind. So you have speed, size of the wind, bending. It's still playing right now. I'm in scene mode now. So you can see the grass blowing around. I'll move the camera down here. So imagine being a bunny rabbit in our game running through this, and there's wolves and deer and all sorts of stuff. And so this is the beginning. This is the beginning. you can kind of start to see things coming together. And this grass should always face the camera, so if I sit here and I rotate the camera, the grass rotates with it. These are actually just 2D textures, the grass. And obviously the the wind is ridiculous right now, like you wouldn't want that. But if I come down here and I play around, like I'll reduce the speed, bending should be a lot lower, so you can see it blowing a little bit, and the size of the wind should be a little bit smaller, and you start to get what you want. Bending, yeah, it's fine, I guess. Grass tint, you can change the tint of your grass for like seasons. I want Kentucky bluegrass. You can kind of get like that yellow look of the grass, I think. It's kind of hard to do because I think that the texture is already green, so any changes you make while it's in play mode are not going to stay, so you can right click on here and hit copy component, unclick play. It returns back to everything it was before. Actually, I think this one might have saved. Different components in Unity will actually stay. Some components don't. This one did. But if it didn't, you use that trick. You copy the component and then you click, you like stop playing the game, and you hit paste component values, and it'll paste all those values back in here. Anyways, I think this video has gone long enough. If you have any questions, please ask. Actually, one more thing real quick. You can add in multiple details as well. So I can hit here and I can add a detail mesh. It doesn't really matter what's grass mesh. Actually, I think it does. Don't want to do a detail mesh. We're going to do a grass mesh. That way it actually knows, hey, I'm grass. And you can add in a new one. So let's add in... Looks like there's like only one grass. Obviously, you can make your own. You don't need to use Unity's. It's actually kind of preferable if you don't, because Unity's isn't the greatest. I'll just use this cartoony looking one since it's really the only option. If I go in here and I draw, I can click on that one and I can draw this grass in as well. So now I have like twice as much grass, but it's 2 different types. So if I go back to the game, you can see. Let's move the camera back down here somewhere into the woods. And using 2 different types of grass textures can make the game look way better, because one type of grass, that's just not realistic at all. Let's go ahead and move the camera right here, align it with the view, and hit play. And now we have the 2 different types of grass in here. Obviously you can't see them blowing around a lot because I changed all those wind settings. Let's increase the bending. There we go. 2 different types of grass. And you can always change and edit these things as you go. Like, looking at this, I would actually make the ground texture darker. So like a little bit too bright. Kind of a whitish gray color. I would want it to be like a darker brown color like you typically see in the forest. But alright, this is the end of the video. I don't think there's really another tutorial to do. I've pretty much covered everything. Obviously, you would go ahead and do this to the other 3 terrain tiles. Always ensure there's a terrain collider on your terrain. Enable tree colliders, so each tree has collision, so that when the characters are put in, like the rabbits and the wolves and stuff, they can actually run on this terrain. And that is how you build terrain in Unity. That's one way to build terrain in Unity. Go ahead, play around with the different algorithms in TerraGen. You know, give a shout out to TerraGen. Email them if you like their products. But yeah, that's pretty much it. I don't really have any more. If you have any questions, please ask.